All right, guys, so for the next few sections, before we start on any projects, we're going to learn about the fundamentals of Bootstrap and all the classes that are available, and we're going to do this by using a sandbox. And a sandbox is basically a collection of files where each file focuses on one or multiple topics. For instance, we'll have a file where we focus on the margin and padding classes. We'll have one where we focus on the nav bar, etc. So it's essentially the stuff that you'll find in the Bootstrap documentation. Now, I will say that these sections aren't going to be as fun as the projects because each video is basically a standalone lesson and we're not really building anything yet. However, it will drill these classes into your head and you'll learn how they all work before starting a project. And if you do already feel comfortable with Bootstrap classes, if you know Bootstrap 4, you could skip these sections and go right into the projects if that's what you want to do. All right, so in this particular lesson, you'll find a download for the sandbox, and you're going to get a start version and a finished version. So what I want you to do is download that zip and then take the start version, copy it, and you can put it wherever you want on your desktop, for instance, and then just rename it from Bootstrap Sandbox Start to just Bootstrap Sandbox. And then this is what we'll work in for the next few sections. So now I'm going to open this up with VS Code. I'll just drag it down. And you can use a different text editor if you want, but I really would suggest using VS Code, especially with Live Server. That way you don't have to keep refreshing the page or anything like that, and you can just follow along directly with what I'm doing. So you can see there's about 27 different files here. So for the next 2 or 3 sections, we're going to go through all of these. And we'll start off at the beginning, which you can see is 01 containers. So if I open that up, you'll see I already have the head tags here. I'm already including Bootstrap. It's in this assets folder here. And then I'm also including at the bottom the Bootstrap JavaScript bundle as well, because later on we'll be getting into things like carousels and modals, things that you need the JavaScript for. And then in some cases, I've also included basically everything except the class. So you can see I have a bunch of text here. I have a div with some empty classes because I want to go over the different container classes and talk about those. It just takes out a lot of the unnecessary typing and just, very boring stuff. So we can just directly, look directly at the classes and what they do. All right, so in the next video, we'll go ahead and we'll start on containers. All right, so we're going to talk about containers in this video and look at some of the container classes. And in Bootstrap, a container is basically a class that's used to wrap and contain the content of your web page within either a fixed or responsive width. So with most modern websites, when you take the browser and you stretch it, let's say you start stretching it 3, 4, 5,000 pixels, most websites will stay in a container rather than stretching it that wide and making it look really weird. So that's where these classes come in. So I'm in the 01 containers.html. I'm just going to close the sidebar up here. And let's open this with Live Server so we can see it in the browser. And basically, I just have a bunch of different text areas, right? If we look down here, just a bunch of divs. There's no class. And inside the divs is an H3 and paragraph. Now, without a container, if I just stretch this, you'll see it'll just keep going, right? And it's not even in the middle. So the container classes also do that. It also pushes everything to the middle. Now we'll start off with just the regular container class. So this first one here, I'm just going to add in a class of container. And when I do that, notice that when I get to a certain width, it stops, right? It doesn't go to the edge of the browser. It's also pushed into the middle, so it gives it a margin of auto. And if we look at our dev tools here, we can see exactly what happens. So if we look at the class of container, the max width in this case is 1320 pixels. So even if I stretch my browser to 5,000 pixels, it's going to stay at this 1320. And you should see margin auto somewhere around here, right here. Margin right auto, margin left auto. That's what puts it in the middle. And that's for all the different container classes. All right, now we have different container sizes based on the breakpoint. meaning the width of the browser. And I have a chart here that will show you. So the regular container class, when you're under 576 pixels, the container is going to be 100%. So if I take this and I make it really small, you can see the size is up in the corner there. It's 537 pixels. 500 is the lowest I can go. So I'm within this range, under 576. In that case, the container takes up 100%. In fact, if I were to look at it here and look at the CSS, it's kind of hard to see, but let's take a look at the width. So right here, width 100%. Because right now I'm in the smallest breakpoint. So the next one up would be if we go above 576, but still within the breakpoint, still below 768, which is the next one. So let's go to, let's say, 626. In that case, the container is going to be a width of 540. So if we look at this now, you can see max width 540. If we go the next level up, which is above 768, so let's go right above 768, and now you'll see max width 720. And if I were to go to the next one up, which is above 992, so let's see, there we go. So now we're above 992, and you can see now it's at 960 pixels, and then extra large, which would be above 1200. So yeah, above 1200. So now the max width is 1140. And then finally, anything above 1400, then your container is going to be 1320, which we saw in the beginning. And there we go, 1320. Now you might want to change those values. So you have these container small, medium, all the way up to extra large, and then you have container fluid. So that's just going to change how wide the container is at which breakpoint. So let's go ahead and add some of those in. So this next one will say container-sm. So that'll be small. Then we'll do container-medium, container-lg, and then container- what are we doing? Extra large, XL, and then we have extra. So container-XXL, and then the last one is going to be container-fluid. And if we look at our chart, you'll see that container and container small basically have the same values. So those are going to stay the same. Container medium is very similar, except on small screens it will be 100% instead of the 540. The large will be 100% on small and medium. The container XL 100% for small, medium, large, and then XXL will be 100% except for the extra large. But fluid will it'll stay at 100% no matter how wide the browser is. So we can kind of test this out by first off making this small, where they're all going to be 100%, right? So if we stretch it out a little wider, you can see right now the container and container small are now restricted to 540 pixels. Right, and then when we hit the medium, so now we're here where container small, and container medium are now restricted to 720. The rest are still 100%. If we go a little larger, you'll see large will kick in at 100%. So, whoops, just put that back. So large kicked in at 100% right here on the medium screen. I'm sorry, I kicked into 720, it was 100%. And if I keep going, you should see extra large will then get restricted. Keep going, XXL will get restricted. And then if I keep going, container fluid is just going to always be 100%. So it's sort of like not having a container at all, because it'll keep going as long as the browser can extend. Okay, so that's kind of the difference between these. In many cases, you'll just use container, especially if you want to have different styles for different sizes. But if you want just a mobile style and then just a large style, you might use one of these larger containers. And if you want the type of layout that just keeps stretching with the browser, then you might use container fluid. All right, but I just wanted to kind of, let you guys know what the difference is between these. All right, guys, so in this video, we're going to look at typography classes and just talk about typography in general. So this is 02-typography HTML. I just opened it with Live Server, so go ahead and do that. And notice that everything is wrapped in a container. I'm going to do that with most of the pages. And also down at the bottom, I added a margin top of 350, just so if I am adding stuff in here, I'm not at the very bottom of the page and you guys are staring down here. So I just wanted to move everything up a little bit. That's why that's there. All right, so let's start off with, actually before we even talk about headings and so on, the font family that's one of the first things you'll notice when you include Bootstrap is that the font changes. If I were to comment this out and save, you'll see we get the default, I think it's Times New Roman or something like that. Very ugly looking. So Bootstrap will change the font and it will basically use the native font stack that selects the best font family for your operating system and device. All right, now if we look at the headings, so I just have H1 through H6 with no classes, and this is what they're going to look like by default. And if I were to look at heading 1, so the font size is going to be calculated, so it's responsive by nature. If we look at the computed font size for the H1, right now at the current screen width, it's 29.89 pixels. But if I were to make this bigger, you'll see that that actually changes. So now if I make it this wide, now the font size is 39.775. So these are going to change with however wide or small your browser is, or whatever the device you're on. All right, now if you want to have different elements, like let's say a paragraph, but you want it to look like a heading, you can actually add the classes of, let's say, H1, H2, that's H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, all the way up to H6. So these are actually classes, and if I save that, now you can see that these are as big as the headings are here. And they're also responsive, meaning they'll get bigger and smaller, just like the actual headings. Now we also have something called display headings, which are a little more prominent. They're great for like hero areas, things like that. So I'm just going to put a cursor in all of these by holding Option or Alt. And let's say display -1, but we have 1 through 6. So that'll be 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and save that. And you'll see that these are actually a little bigger. If I make the browser, bigger, so the H1 is pretty large. The H2 is bigger than the regular H1, so it makes them larger, but the font weight also looks a little lighter and it looks a little cleaner. So I really like those for, like I said, like hero images and stuff like that, or hero areas. All right, and then this paragraph here, let's say you had some subtext or like a subheading and you just wanted to make it a little larger, you could use the class of lead, so that will make it a little larger. That's good for like I said, like subheadings. We do have a block quote class as well. So if we say block quote, that will make that a little more prominent. Now there's also classes for different weights, and I'm actually just going to paste this in. If there's a lot of stuff, a lot of different classes, instead of just typing it all out, I'm going to just paste it in and explain it. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And notice that the top one here is bold. I used the class of FW bold. So these are all prefixed with FW to change the font weight. Then you have bolder, which is going to make it a little more bold relative to the parent element. And then FW semi-bold, which will make it a little less bold. You have FW medium, so medium weight. FW normal, that's basically, the default. And then FW light and FW lighter for lighter weights. And then down here, if you want to use italic text, then you use FST-italic. And to go back to normal, you could do FST-normal. So those are font weight classes. Now for line heights, we have LH classes. So I'm going to do LH-1. And this paragraph here, you can see now there's much less of a line height, so they're kind of on top of each other, which doesn't look very good. And then there's LH-SM, which is also going to be less than the regular line height. And then there's also LH-base, which is the default, so that doesn't change at all. And then if you want a wider line height, you can do LH-LG, and now you can see there's quite a bit of space between these lines. Okay, we also have text transform classes. So if you want to have your text all lowercase, but you don't want to touch the content, maybe it's coming from a database or something, you could add text dash lowercase. If you want it to be all uppercase, you can use text dash uppercase. And if you want just the first word of each letter, or first letter of each word to be capitalized, you would use text capitalize. So you can see that here. All right, now there's also text alignment classes, and you can also you can have certain alignments based on the screen size as well. So let's start with the classes for all viewports. So we'll do text dash, and I'm going to do start. So before, in Bootstrap 4, it was text left, but now if you want to align to the left, it's going to be start. And it's not just text classes, there's other classes as well that use start and end instead of left and right. So if you want to align to the center, that's obviously going to be text center. And then if you want to align to the right, that's going to be text end instead of text right. So that's going to be these three lines here. Now I want to show you that you can make these take effect on specific screen sizes as well. So I'm going to say text dash SM, meaning small screens, and we'll say end for that. Okay, and then let's go to the next paragraph here, and I'll do text dash MD dash end, and then text dash LG, so large, end, and then text dash XL, so extra large screens, and then end. So right now, you can see they're all at the start. As soon as I hit the small, which is, what is small? We looked at the breakpoints in the last video. I think it's 576. You can see that this now got aligned to the end or the right. If I go a little bit more to the medium breakpoint, now this line is aligned to the right, which is this right here. Okay, if I go a little bit more, the large will get aligned to the right or the end, and if I go a little bit more, the extra large will get aligned. All right, so you can do those pertaining to the screen size. All right, so that's pretty much it for these typography classes. In the next video, I want to talk about display. So if you want to display block, inline, flex, etc., and also positioning relative and absolute, and so on. Okay, so now we're going to look at background colors and text colors. And I'm sure that a lot of you watching this already know most of these. These are, if you've ever used Bootstrap, these are very common. So we'll start off with background colors. And since there's so many different classes I have to add in here, I'm actually going to paste it in and then we'll just go over them. All right, so if I go ahead and save this, you can see we have different, not colors, but contexts. So for instance, primary, secondary, success, etc. So these are contexts, and by default, there's specific colors that go with these contexts. As you can see, BG primary gives you this blue color, right? BG secondary gives you a gray. So these are basically for your main colors of your theme or your template, your primary and secondary colors. And then you have success, which is commonly used for pop-ups and stuff like that, alerts that are successful. So if you, let's say, submit some data to a database, you have a green success pop-up, right? But you can change these colors, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So danger, obviously red is the default for danger. Warning is yellow. Info is light blue. And then light is not quite white, but it's very light gray. Then you have dark, which is not quite black, but very dark. And then you have BG black and BG white for straight white and black. You also have transparent as well. All right, now, if you want to change these colors, there's a couple ways you can do that. So first off, you can overwrite the CSS. So if you want to go into your own CSS and write .bg primary and add, a custom color for that, you can, but that's not really the the recommended way to do it. What I would suggest doing is using Sass and compiling your own Bootstrap file with your own colors for these contexts. And that might sound really difficult to some of you that are, kind of beginners, but we're going to get into this later. I'm going to show you how to do that. But these are the defaults. Now, notice that with some of these, the text doesn't look right, especially for the really dark ones, you can't see the text at all. For the primary and secondary and the success, I'd probably have these with white text. So there's a few ways you can do that. You can use the text classes, right? So for instance, if I were to go right here and say text dash white, then that will make the text white. However, you can save yourself an extra class by just adding text dash and then BG whatever. So what I'm going to do is paste this in here. So paste that in, and now I'll save, and notice we get the same background colors. However, the text is the right color, and that's because we did text dash and then BG primary, BG secondary, etc. So you can add the extra text class if you want, or you can prefix these with text dash. Okay, now when it comes to the text colors, we have the same context. Remember, and it's not just backgrounds and text, buttons, badges, there's all kinds of elements with these contexts. So I'm going to paste this in and save, and now notice that the text color is what has changed, not the background. So instead of BG primary, I did text primary. Okay, and then on the text light, I added the BG dark class so that we could actually see it. And then you also have muted, which is basically like a light gray, black dash 50, which is an even lighter gray, and you also have white dash 50, which is even lighter. So you couldn't even, I don't even think you can see it on a white background. Yeah, you can't see it on a white background. All right, so those are the text colors. Now, we also have gradients, and basically all you have to do there is add the BG class, and in this case I use text dash and then the BG, and then just add BG gradient. So now we have the blue color, which is a gradient. You can see it kind of goes from dark to light. Same thing with the rest of these. So it's the same color, but it's instead of being flat, it's a gradient. Now you can also have opacity, so you can make them a little lighter. So we're looking at this area right here. So if I just add, let's say, text dash BG dash success, so it gives me that regular green. However, on this one here, I'm going to add text dash BG success, but I'm also going to add a class of BG dash opacity dash 75. So now it's basically 75% of the color. So 75 is it's going to be darker than 50 and 25 and so on. So I'm going to just copy this, and then in this one here, let's do 50, and you'll see that's a little bit lighter. Okay, if we go right here, let's do opacity 25. That's even lighter, and then you also have 10. So BG opacity 10. That's even lighter. You can't even read the text. But I could add another, actually, if I just do BG success without the text dash, then it'll be the dark text. Probably want to do that here as well. Okay, so if you do need different shades, I mean, there's tons of colors within the Sass that are in variables that you can change when we get into that. But if you're just using the default Bootstrap CSS and you want it to be a little lighter, you can always use these opacity classes. And then at the same time, we also have our text opacity. So here, let's do text dash opacity 75. Okay, so you notice that this right here is a little lighter. And then we'll take that and let's do 50. And let's do 25. Okay, so you can see that you can add that to the text as well. And then when it comes to links, we also have the link colors or link context. So you'll see link primary, secondary, So if I save that, now we have all these different colored links. All right, so I mean, it's pretty simple. I'm sure that a lot of you already knew about these contextual classes. So in the next video, we're going to get into something really important, and that is spacing. So we're going to look at the margin and padding utility classes. All right, so now we're going to get into spacing. So we have some really handy margin and padding utility classes, and I love these because there's so many different areas where you just want to add a little bit of spacing. And before Bootstrap had these, you'd have to write your own custom CSS. And that's why I love Tailwind, because Tailwind had these, right out of the gate. So one thing that I want to show you before I show you the classes is this slide right here. So no matter what you're doing with this space, whether you're adding margin on the top or bottom or all sides, or if you're adding padding or whatever it is, you're going to have something and then -1 through 5. And these are the default values for 1 through 5. So it's 0.25 rem for -1, 0.5 rem for 2, 1 rem for 3, 1.5 rem for 4, and 3 rem for 5. All right, so if I do, let's say, M-5, that's going to be margin on all sides of 3 rem. Now, you can change these, but you do have to get into Sass and changing variables, and I'm going to show you how to do that. In fact, I usually add a -6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or maybe just 6, 7, 8, because a lot of times I need more spacing than this, but I don't want to change these initial values. All right, but we'll get into the customization later. So let's take a look at spacing or margin on all sides. And you'll notice I do have just some background colors, background classes that we already talked about. Anytime I have predefined classes in the sandbox, it's something we already looked at. All right, so I'm just going to add on to this M-1, and then on the rest of these, so I'll just hold down Option and say M-, and then for this one, we'll say 2, 3, 4, 4, and 5. Okay, so what we're looking at is this right here, and margin, of course, is the outside of the element, so it's not going to be within the color. That would be padding, and we'll get to that soon. But what I want to do is open up the dev tools and just show you. If I look at the first one here, you'll see the M1 margin is 0.25 rem. If I look at the second one, 0.5 rem, and so on. If I look at the last one, that's going to be 3 rem. All right, so that's margin on all sides. Now let's look at margin on just the top and the bottom, which is the y-axis, because it's vertical. So I'm just going to replace these, and these are just going to have one added class of my dash and then 1 through 5. So notice that the margin is only on the y-axis. It's only on the top and bottom. In fact, if I open up my dev tools, and you can see here, the margin outline is only the top and bottom. Up here, it's around the entire thing. Okay, so we have M dash for all around, my for the vertical axis up in our top and bottom, and then for margin left and right, we can do mx, which is the x-axis. So let's go ahead and add that. So now we have mx 1 through 5, and now the margin is on both sides. Okay, now you can also do just the top. So for that, you probably guessed it, it's going to be MT. So the red here, you can see now the margin is just on the top. If you want to do just the bottom, you can do that with MB. So the yellow here, you'll see now they have margin on just the bottom. And then if you want to do margin left, it's not going to be ML. If you're coming from Tailwind, you might use ML and MR. But remember, it's start and end. So it's actually going to be MS dash 1 through 5. So now this light blue here, the infos, you can see have the margin on the left. And then if you want the margin on the right, which is the end, you're going to use ME dash 1 through 5. All right, so what did I do here? Oh, I used MS again. Let me grab the ME. Okay, so now notice the margin is on the end or the right. Now we can also use margin auto, which is going to take whatever margin is left and add the rest to either on the x-axis, y-axis, left, right, etc. So this first one here, and notice I have this W50. I know we haven't gone over these yet, but this just means width 50%. That's why these yellow ones are half the width. And I did this because you wouldn't be able to tell if they were full width if we put margin auto on the left or right, or both. So this first one here, I'm going to add a class of M auto. And what that does is it adds auto to all sides. So if I look at in my dev tools here and we check this out, so M auto just has margin auto. All right, now for the next one, I'm going to do margin auto on just the Y axis, which since there's no height, it's not going to really do anything, but we do have MY auto. Now, if you want margin on the left and right, which is often what you want to do when you want to center something, then you can do MX dash auto. So that will also put it in the middle. And then if you want to add all the margin on the start or the left, you can do MS auto. So now, notice how now the margin is over here. And if you want it on the right, you can do ME dash auto. So margin end. And obviously that doesn't make any difference here. But yeah, so those are the auto classes. Now for padding, it's basically the same thing, except instead of M, you use P. And I did just add MY2 to all of these just to kind of separate these out a little bit. But now we're going to add some padding classes. So I'll go ahead and just type these ones in here. We're going to do P1. And I'll just, let's just go like this. And then P dash. So this one will do 2, 3, 4, and 5. And remember, padding is inner. It's in the element, so it's going to be inside the background color. And these values are going to be the same. This is 0.25 rem, 0.5, 1 rem, 1.5, and 3 rem. And that's padding all the way around. Now, if you want padding on just the top and bottom, then you can do PY because it's on the Y axis. So now if I do that, notice that it's still up against the edge on the side, but we have the padding on the top and bottom. If you want the padding on the left and right, then you would do PX. So we'll go ahead and add that, and now we have the margin on the left and right. If you wanted padding on just the top, then you can use PT. Okay, so that gives us the, on the top, actually I wanted to have text BG here. So I'm just going to add that in, just to stay consistent. All right, so now for the bottom, that's going to be PB, obviously. I mean, this stuff is pretty self-explanatory, but I just want to be thorough. So now the padding's on the bottom. Now, if we want the padding on the left or the start, that's going to be PS, not PL. When I started using these classes, I used to mess it up and use PL and ML and MR. But yeah, that's padding at the start. And then if you want padding at the right or the end, that's going to be PE. Okay, which we can't really tell a difference here. But that's padding. Now, another way that we can add spacing for multiple items is with stacks. So we have a div here that wraps 3 other divs. Now, this could be 100 divs in here. If you want to add an even amount of space in between each one, you can use a stack. And if you want it to go, vertically up and down, then you can use a V stack, vertical stack. And then in addition to that, you're going to add a gap between 0 and 5. So if I do gap 3 and save, now this list here with the BG info has a margin in between each one. And it doesn't matter, even if I had 100 of these coming from a database, they would have an even amount of space in between each one. Okay, and then there's also an H stack. So if I do H stack and then gap dash 3, that's actually going to put them into a row, and it's going to add the space in between. And if I wanted a little more space, I could do gap 5, and that will add a little more space. Okay, so you have stacks that you can use for spacing as well. All right, so that's it. In the next video, we're going to look at some of the sizing classes, so height and width, as well as borders and shadows. All right, guys, so now we're going to look at some sizing classes, as well as classes that have to do with borders and shadows. So as far as sizing goes, we'll start off with width. And there's going to be cases where you're going to have to write some custom CSS with a specific width. because we're kind of limited here to full width, 25% width, 50%, and 75%. Same with height. So width auto is the default. So if I go in here, and I just added some classes like BG Success, text white, and actually I could have did text BG Success, and that's fine, but and some padding. But I want to add W-auto and save, and that's not going to change because that's the default. But I could also do width or W-25. If I do that, notice that now it's only 25% the width. If I do W50, that's going to be half. If I do W-75, that's going to be half. And then you also have W100 for full width, which is also going to look the same in this case. Okay, now height. So the height class is whatever wraps these divs where I want to add the height classes to has to have a height itself. So that's why I have this 300 pixel, and I just added a border so you can see, where it ends. So I'm going to go to the first one here and add H-25. So now this right here, you can see has a height of 25% of its container. And then we'll go to this one here, let's say H50. So that one's going to be half its container. This one here, let's say H75, that's going to be 75%. And then we have H100, which will be 100. And then H auto, which is the default. So if I save that, it does nothing. It just takes up the height of the content that's in there. Okay, so those are the different height classes. And that's pretty much it. And like I said, you're probably going to have to write some custom CSS when it comes to adding sizes. So for borders are pretty easy, and you have a lot of different options. So I can add the class here of border, and we're looking at this right here where it says regular. And if I save, it adds this border all around. Now if I want to have just the border on the top, I can say border top. Okay, so that adds it on the top. If I want it on the bottom, I can say border bottom. Now it's just on the bottom. I can even do it on just the left and right. That gives it a border. There I go again. So it's border start. And then we got border dash end. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's start and end. I still have issues with that because I go back and forth from Bootstrap to Tailwind and some other CSS frameworks as well. Now, you might not always want that color, so you can actually add in the context of primary, secondary, and so on, and you can use those with the border. So I'm going to paste these in, and all I did here was in addition to border. So remember, you have to do this in addition, not just the context class. But I added border primary, which gave me a blue border in this case. So border secondary gave me the kind of gray, and then we have success, which gave me the green, border info, warning, danger, light, dark, and white. Okay, so that's how you can change the color. Now for the radius, we have quite a few options, so I'm just going to paste these in and go over them. And we're looking at these here. So you have a class of rounded, which will just give you this rounded. I think that's 5 pixels or maybe 10. Actually, let's take a look at the CSS. So we have border radius, and then it's this variable with it's 0.35 rem. But if we look at the computed, let's see, looks like it's 6 pixels for the radius. All right, and then we have rounded top. So what that does is it just does the top left and right. Rounded bottom will do just the bottom left and right. Rounded end will do the right. Rounded start will do the left. And then you can also do rounded circle, which will try to get it to be circular depending on what's inside of it. And I made it width 25 just to make it smaller so you could see more of a circle. And this is good for like icons if you want to have a circle behind icons. Now you might want to change the radius to be more steep or more circular. So rounded 1 will be this right here. Rounded 2, a little more rounded. Rounded 3, 4, and then 5 is pretty rounded. Okay, so those are the rounded classes. And then we have shadows. So I'll go ahead and add those. And the first one we have is shadow none, which obviously is no shadow. So, I mean, it's the same as if you don't add anything. We have shadow SM, which will give you a faint shadow like this. And then just the class of shadow is the regular. And then shadow large will be a large shadow with that spreads out pretty far. All right, so those are some styling classes that are pretty helpful, especially when you're doing like cards and stuff like that. So in the next video, I know we talked about breakpoints a little bit when we looked at containers, but we're going to look at breakpoints a little more. All right, so I just want to quickly go over the breakpoints again. You should have these kind of drilled into your mind if you're going to be using Bootstrap all the time. So for extra small, or for just, the smallest it goes for mobile screens is going to be under 576 pixels. And then small screens is going to be 576 up to 768. Medium screens is going to be 768 up to 992. Large screens 992 to 1200, and extra large 1200 to 1400, and then anything above 1400 is going to be XXL, or extra large. Okay, so just to kind of have you visualize this a little better, I'm going to open up breakpoints HTML, and I just have some custom CSS that I'm going to put in here. I just added body background white, so this is going to be for extra small devices, less than 576. Now let's write a media query for small screens. So I'm going to say @media, and again, I'm assuming that you have a little bit of CSS knowledge. So I'm going to say for this media query, I want to say min width, and let's say for 576 pixels, and then we'll set the body, and we'll set background to red. Okay, so I'll save that, and it's still white because I'm on extra small right now. But once I hit that breakpoint of 576, it'll turn red, and it'll stay red as long as I go up because I don't have anything else, right? I don't have any other media queries saying to do anything else. So let's go on to the next one, which would be medium screens. And actually, I'll just copy this. Okay, and then we're just going to change this to 767. And let's change the background to blue. Okay, so it's still on red, which means I'm still in the small range. If I hit the medium range, then it turns blue, and it'll stay blue. Okay, because that's the last media query I have. So it goes from white to red to blue. Now for large, let's go down here. And since that applies to 992 and up, I'm going to change the min width here to 991. And I'm going to set the background here to green. So now, if I go bigger, so right now I'm on medium screens. Once I hit large, it's going to turn green. All right, and then we can do XL, or extra large, which is going to be 1200. So for this, let's say 1199 and up, then we're going to make this yellow. So now it's green. As soon as I hit XL, which is going to be the 1200, then it turns yellow. And then finally we have XXL. So for that, let's do, that's going to be 1400 and up. So I'll say 1399. And then let's set that to purple. So now if I bring this up and it goes past 1400, then it turns purple, and it'll stay purple as wide as I can go. All right, so you can see each breakpoint changes color. All right, so in the next video, we're going to look at buttons and all the different variations. Okay, so now we're going to get into buttons, which are a really cool UI element. And this is an example of one of the pros to me for Bootstrap versus Tailwind. I love both frameworks. I have a course on both frameworks. And the thing I like about Bootstrap is that if you just quickly need to have a good-looking button, you can simply add a class or two classes. If you want to create a nice-looking button with Tailwind, then you have to add, 5 or 6 classes because you need to manually add your padding, your border, your background color, all that stuff. Where with Bootstrap, we can come down here onto one of these buttons. We can add a class of BTN. If I do that, then it adds the padding and all that. And then I can add the color or the context by saying BTN dash and then whatever context or color I want to use, like primary. Okay, so now I have a pretty good looking button with just these two classes. All right, now we have the same context slash colors that we have for backgrounds and text and links and all that stuff. So for the rest of these, I'll just go ahead and paste these in. Pretty simple. Just remember that you have to have the BTN class in addition to the context class. When I first learned Bootstrap, a lot of times I would forget and I would just do BTN primary. But we have, secondary, success, danger, warning, info, a light button, dark, and then a button formatted as a link. Okay, now we also have sizes. So there's 3 different sizes. You have your regular, which we just saw, so that's regular. And then we can also do smaller buttons. So BTN, I'll use success on this one. And then we can add BTN SM. So as you can see, that's a little smaller. And then if we want it a little bigger, we can do, let's say, danger, and then BTN-LG, and that makes it bigger. And those are the only sizes. There's no XL. You can see that doesn't work. So there's just regular, small, and large. And then for states, of course, we have regular, so BTN-primary. And then if we want a disabled button, we can do BTN primary, and then I'm going to add a class of disabled. And you can see that it's lighter, and it also doesn't have the pointer cursor, so it's essentially disabled. And then there's also an active state, so let's use the same context for that. And then active, and basically it has the look of being hovered over. See, when I hover over this, it's the same color, it's just a little darker than the normal. Now we also have outline buttons. So if you want a transparent background, but you want the color to be the border, then you can add a class of basically these same classes with outline. So I'm going to grab those and put those here, except for the link. There's no outline link. And then if we put the cursor here on all of these, we should be able to do outline, dash, and then primary, secondary, etc. And if I save that, now you can see that we have these outline buttons. Okay, the text and the border are the colors of these contexts. So that's outline. Now we also have links formatted as buttons, which you'll use quite a bit. So if you have like a hero image and you have a read more button or something like that, usually that's not going to be a button, it's going to be a link, but you want it to look like a button. So of course we can just add BTN and then any button class. There's no specific classes for links. You can just use the same thing. And you can also do like sizes. So if we wanted this to be larger, we could do that. If we wanted it to be disabled, we could do that as well, even though it's a link and not a button. Now for block buttons, which are buttons that spread all the way across 100% width, what we used to do is have a class, let's say BTN-primary. What we used to do is have a class of BTN block, okay, in Bootstrap 4, and I'll just say submit. So as you can see, that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't make it a block button. So what's recommended is to actually wrap your button or buttons in a class of dgrid, so display as a grid. And then if we put that button inside of that div, then it's a block button. Okay, it stretches all the way across. And I could put another button in here, like maybe I have a cancel button, and we'll change the context to danger, to red, and that will be spread across as well. And maybe I want some space in between, so I could add VStack onto this and say gap dash, we'll say gap dash 3, and that will add some spacing. Okay, so those are block buttons. Now we can group buttons together as well. So if I use the class of btn-group, and typically you'll have a role attribute for this as well for accessibility, and we'll say group. And then inside here we can have our buttons, so btn primary, and I'm going to just add the text of left to this one, and then we'll go ahead and copy this down, and then this one will be the middle, and this one will be the right, And if I save that, now we have a group of buttons, and they don't have to all be the same style. We could say secondary for this one. And the left side has the rounded corners, and the right side also has rounded corners. Anything you put in the middle obviously won't, because it's part of this group. All right, now we can also have groups of groups, which we can put in a toolbar. So we have a class of button toolbar, and we'll add a role to this as well of toolbar. And what I could do is take this whole group here and add that in, and then add another group. And I'm just going to change these, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Save that. And now we have a toolbar with two groups. Now you probably want to put some space in there, so we could add, we could do this a few ways. We could say ME3, and that will push it over a little bit. Okay, it kind of looks like the pagination links here, but there is also pagination styling in Bootstrap, which we'll get to later. And then the last thing I want to show you here is the drop-down button. Now you do have to have the JavaScript, because in order to use drop-downs in Bootstrap, you do have to include the JavaScript file. So make sure you have that. And then we'll have a class of drop-down, a div with the class of drop-down, and then we'll have the button. So I'll say BTN and BTN secondary, and then it's also going to have a class of drop-down dash, not frop-down, drop-down dash toggle. Okay, and then in here I'll just say drop down button. Now one thing you want to do is add another attribute here of data dash BS dash toggle. Okay, so if you don't have that, it's not going to work. And then underneath that, we're going to have a UL with the class of drop down dash menu. And then inside that, we'll have LIs. You don't need a class on the LI, but for the A tags, you do want to have a class of drop-down dash item. And we'll just add a link here. We'll just say link 1, and we'll copy that down, 2 and 3. Save it, and now we see drop-down button. It'll automatically add this little arrow. And let's see, it's not working. Why is it not working? Oh, I'm sorry. This data BS toggle, we need to set that to drop down, because there's different types of toggles. All right, so if I do that, now you can see we have our links. All right, so those are buttons. In the next video, we're going to start to get into nav bars. So now we're going to look at nav bars, and I'm going to just type it out from scratch. And then to give you some other examples like the color variant and so on, I'll copy the one that I type out. And the reason I have some text here is so that we can scroll down the page, because I want to show you that we can stick the nav bar to the top. So we'll start off with a simple nav bar. So this is it should always be in a nav tag, and then we're going to have a class of nav bar, and then a class of nav bar dash expand, and then a size. Now what this does, if I do LG, what that means is anything under the large breakpoint is going to be the hamburger menu, as opposed to just showing me the links. So you can do LG, you can do MD, so it's really up to you. And then we can also do a background. Let's make this a light nav bar. Okay, so that's the nav class. Now you should, well, I shouldn't say you should, but I like to have a container in the nav bar so that if I stretch the browser really wide, the links and the logo and stuff, they don't go way off to the side, they stay contained. So you can either do container, or if you do want it to go off to the side, you could do container fluid, but I'm going to stick to container. All right, and then we need the logo area, which will be an A tag with the class of navbar dash brand, because that's where the branding goes. And you could have this usually go to your home page or whatever. And for the text, I'm just going to say navbar. You could put an image in there if you wanted to. Then we want the toggle button, which is going to be the hamburger menu. So that's going to be a button, and that's going to have a class of navbar dash toggler. Okay, and then we're going to have a few more attributes on this. So we do want to give it a type as well of button. And I'm going to give it a couple data attributes. So we're going to say data-bs-toggle, just like we did with the drop-down button, and we're going to set that to collapse instead of drop-down. And then we need a target. So for that, we're going to have a data-bs-target, and you can set this to, I don't know why I keep putting bs target, and then I'm going to set that to an ID of, let's say, navbar nav. All right, so I think that should do it. There are other accessibility attributes you can add, other ARIA attributes, but I just want you to get familiar with the classes and with the data attributes here. Okay, now inside the button, we're not going to have any text. We're going to actually have a span. So it's going to be a span with the class of navbar-toggler-icon. Okay, so that'll give us that little hamburger menu, as you can see here. Now notice when I expand it, as soon as I hit medium, it goes away. But if I change this expand right here to LG, so to large, then I can keep going through medium, and then once I hit large, then it goes away. I could even add XL. If I do that, it'll show through large until I get to XL. So it's really up to you on when you want that hamburger menu to appear. I usually do medium, but in some cases I will do large. So we have that. Now for the links, we're going to go, let's see, underneath the button, still within the div of the container, still within the nav. So right under the button, we'll have a class of collapse and a class of navbar-collapse. And then I'm going to have an ID that matches this right here, the target, because it needs to know when I click this button what's going to open. So this is how we can tell, is we put the same, we'll say navbar nav. Okay, and then inside that we'll have a UL, and that UL is going to have a class of navbar-nav, and I want the links to be to the right, so we can say margin start-auto. That'll push the links to the right. If you don't add that, the links will be next to the logo or the branding. And then each LI will have a nav-item. Okay, and then inside that, each link is going to have a class of nav-link. And you can also add a class of active if you want to one of them. So for this, let's just say home. And then what I'll do is copy down the LI a couple times. So we'll say home, about, services, and contact. And of course you don't want to have all these actives, you just want it on one. So we'll get rid of those, and that should do it. So I'll save. Now if I click that, you can see that the toggler works, and if I go past medium, then we're just going to see the links, and they're on the right because of this MS Auto. If I don't have this, then they're going to be right next to the logo, but I usually like to have them on the right. So pretty simple. I know there's a lot of classes and stuff, but this is once you know how to create it, then it's pretty easy. Now we can have different colors. So what I'm going to do is just copy this nav that we just created, and we'll go down here under color variant. I'll paste that in, and what I'm going to do is change it to, let's say BG. Well, let's say BG dark. So now I have a dark colored nav bar, but notice that I can't see the text. So you could add like text white, but there's a special class called navbar-dark. So what we're saying is that this nav bar is dark, so the text will then be light. And the links are actually they're kind of grayish, so that we can have a hover effect, and then the active link is white in this case. Now, if I wanted to change this to like the primary color, I could do that as well. And I would probably keep the navbar dark because I would prefer to have light text on the blue. But yeah, you can use any background color that you want. Now you can also fix your nav bars to the top. So I'm going to come down here, because right now if I scroll, then the nav bars are going to go away. But in many cases, especially these days, you have websites where instead of multiple pages, you have multiple sections on one page, and you click a button or you click a link, and it will go down to that section. In fact, we can do that. I'm going to go down in this paragraph. Actually, I already have an ID of about. So if I were to, let's go to the first nav bar we created, and on this about, I'll say hash about. And now if I click on that, it goes down to about, which isn't very far. Actually, if I make this smaller, let me click about. And notice that it does the smooth scroll automatically. That's new in Bootstrap 5 too. You used to click it and it would just kind of flick down, and you had to implement special classes to have the smooth scroll, but it just does it automatically now, which is really nice. Now, if you have multiple sections and I click about here, I have to go back up to see the other menu items. So that's where the sticky nav bar comes in handy. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add another nav bar down here. So I'll paste that in, and then we can add a class of fixed top, and I'll change this to a dark. So BG dark, and then I'm going to do navbar dash dark. Okay, so now it's at the top, and if I hit about, oops, I need to put the ID of about, and if I do it now, you can see that it stays at the top. So I'll then be able to navigate around the page or the website easily. So the next thing I want to show you is how we can put a form in a nav bar. So what I'll do, I guess I'll just paste in another one. And let's see, I'm going to take out the button here. Actually, we'll just take out everything, because you don't even have to have navigation in your nav bar. If I do that and I save, let's change the color here. I'll do BG, I don't know, BG warning, like that. And instead of having links, I'm going to add a form. So I'm going to go under the brand, and let's say form. I'm going to give it a class of dflex, which will display it as a flex box, and no action. And typically you might see role on this as well, and set that to search. So this would be a search form. And then we'll have an input. And again, I know we haven't gone over inputs yet, but we'll go over classes like form control very soon. And then I'm also going to do margin end to, make sure we put a slash there, and then we'll have a button underneath. And let's do btn dash dark, or say search. Okay, if I save that, now we have a form in the nav bar. And if I make it smaller, well, we don't have the toggler anymore, but if I did have a toggler, that form would show in the toggler. And the reason why all three open at the same time here is because I have the same ID for all of them, which is this nav bar nav. So, I mean, obviously you wouldn't have more than one nav bar on a page, so you're not going to run into this issue. Well, I mean, normally you wouldn't have more than one. Maybe there's a case where you would. But yeah, so that's pretty much it as far as nav bars go. In the next video, we're going to start to get into the Bootstrap grid, which is very important because you need a way to lay out your pages. So we'll get into that next. All right, guys. So in this video, I want to show you the dark mode feature of Bootstrap 5, as well as some of the variables that are offered that you can use in your own custom CSS. So with Bootstrap 5, we can actually enable dark mode very easily. So if we go to the HTML tag here and we put in data-bs-theme and we set that to dark and I save, everything turns to dark mode, okay, which is really cool. And you can toggle this if you implement some JavaScript. And we're gonna get into that in the next section. But to enable dark mode, that's all you have to do. And you can see the card is also dark. All right, now if I wanted to have a card that was light mode within my dark mode, I could, let's see, I'm just going to copy this card right here, and we'll go under it. And what I'm going to do is on the div that has the card, I'm going to put data BS theme, and I'm going to set that one to light. So now that card is light mode. All right, so very simple. Now, as far as variables go, if you want to add your own CSS, and let's say you wanted to use the Bootstrap blue color, you could use this custom property, BS blue. There's also BS primary, secondary. There's just a ton of variables here that you can look at in the documentation. And then variables for dark mode as well, because those colors may be different. And just to show you that I can use those in my own CSS, what I'll do is just come up here and put in a style tag, and then just to keep this simple, I'll set it on the body, I'll set the background, and the way that we use custom properties in CSS is with var. So we'll say var and then dash dash bs dash primary. If I save that, now I can use that primary color as my background or anywhere else in my CSS. And we can also use BS blue, so that'll give me the same thing. We could do danger, that'll be the danger color. We could do yellow or warning, those are going to be the same as well. Okay, so just to let you know that, and again, there's tons of different variables that you can use. All right, so that's pretty much it as far as the classes go, the CSS. In the next section, I want to get into some of the JavaScript widgets that are offered with Bootstrap.